Hello, in today's video I'm going to take you step by step through how to knit a super chunky hat for a little one. The hat sizes available will be 0 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months and 12 to 24 months. In this video I'm going to take you through the 6 to 12 month size, as this little hat is intended for my baby niece. The other two sizes are available in the written pattern, which is available at our website from the link below. If you're new to Flock and Fern, hello and welcome. If you want to hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon, you'll get a notification every time we post something new. We post videos on knitting projects like this one, and also specific knitting techniques, from absolute beginners to some more advanced options. So let's get started knitting this hat. For this project, you are going to need some yarn. I'm using this gorgeous alpaca blend super chunky yarn. It is from my very overfull yarn cupboard, as I'm on a buying ban, which is painful. So this is a bit of a stash busting project for me. So this is a gorgeous like pale pink fleck colour. As I've said, it's for my baby niece, so I think that's going to look smashing. You'll also need some knitting needles. I'm using these 8mm diameter cable knitting needles. They have a cable length of 40 centimeters, which is super important, as the shorter the cable length, the easier it is to knit the hat. Some cable lengths can vary from like over a meter long, and they're not useful for knitting hats. They're useful for something like a blanket where it takes the weight off, and you've got a lot of stitches cast on. So these are perfect, and I picked them up from a local yarn store. You will also need some scissors, a darning needle with an eye that's thick enough or wide enough for some super chunky yarn, and a stitch marker. Any is available. Or if you don't have one of these to hand, use a little piece of waste yarn that's an alternative colour to what you're knitting with for the hat itself. Okay, so using the super chunky yarn, I'm going to cast on to my knitting needles. This is how you start any knitting project. This technique I'm going to use is super helpful because it will give a stretchy finish to the edge of our hat, which is a nice softer feeling for a baby's hat. So taking the yarn, we've got the tail end and the ball end. The ball end is the side that's still attached to the rest of the yarn. And I'm going to create a slip knot. If you need this in more detail, check out my other video on how to cast on. So I'm just going to scoop the yarn up with my 2 fingers, wrap the yarn over and at the back of my 2 fingers, around the front, and cross them over. Again, I'm going to take the tail end and tuck it under that band that's across the back of my fingers, like so, and then just pull that through. And if you tighten off the ball end, it creates a nice loop, and that is your slip knot. Then picking up my circular knitting needles, I'm going to put the needle through the loop and then tighten it by pulling on both the tail end and the ball end, and making sure that it's firmly on the knitting needle, but is not too tight so it's able to move. And that's important for maintaining the tension. Then what I'm going to do is drop the tail end, as that is no longer needed. And using the other knitting needle, I'm going to go into the bottom of that cast on, which is our first stitch, through the front, like as in to knit. So it's going to go in the front and across the back. So I've crossed it there at the back. And then I'm going to take the ball end of the yarn and wrap it around the back of that rear needle, in between the two. And then I'm going to pull that back needle down to the front. And then I'm going to do something that's a bit crazy to create that super stretchy cast on. I'm going to pull that stitch through so that it's longer than what you'd think you'd need. So you're getting up more yarn. I'm then going to turn the needle to the side and create a twist. You see it there? That twist. And then I'm going to put the left needle back on through that loop, and then pull the needle out, and then I'm going to slip that stitch on by pulling the ball end of the yarn. So now we've got 2 needles on there. 2 stitches. So I'm doing 1 by 1 rib cast on. So that means that my next stitch needs to be in the purl format. So what I'm going to do is take my right needle, and put it under and through from the back to the front of that stitch that we've just casted on. Take the ball end and wrap it round in between the two as if to purl. Now this time I'm going to pull that right needle down and through, but instead of sliding it off, I'm going to take it, twist and slide that new loop on and then pull the ball end to secure. Now you can tell it was a purl because the working yarn, so your ball end, is back kind of a step or a stitch. And that's how we know that that was a purl stitch. And now what I'm going to do is a knit. So I'm going to go back in the front, in between the two, get the yarn, wrap it round as if to knit, pull it through, make a big loop, twist, and put it back onto the needle and pull the working yarn to tighten. But remember, don't have it too tight so you can still slip your stitches around to maintain your tension. And now the working yarn is to the front of the work or closer to where you would expect it to be. And that means that my next stitch is going to be a purl. So the right needle is going to go in the back as if to purl, wrap the yarn round, pull it through, make that big loop again onto the left needle, slip the right needle out and pull your working yarn. And now you can see that the working yarn is one stitch behind, so it means the next one needs to be a knit. So we're going into the front, across the back, wrapping it round, pulling it through and sliding and back on. And then you just repeat. And what we want to have is 34 stitches cast on. So just now we've got 2, 4, 6. So we need to get to 34. And we're just going to repeat that purl and knit cast on using this method. Okay, so I'm just counting my cast on stitches. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 34. Perfect. So this is going to be for the 6 to 12 month size. Now what we need to do is join the round. So if I take the needles so that they're both at the top, ready to work, and slide these cast on stitches so that we've got them at each end. Don't worry if your cable bends or anything, that's absolutely fine. Just as long as you try and keep that cast on edge to the inside so you don't get twisted. Now to join in the round, we're going to slip this stitch that was the last one we cast on. We're going to slip it off from the left needle to the right like this. So going in the front, slide it off. And we're going to take this last, this stitch that's on the right needle, which was our slip knot. We're going to pick it up from the front and slide it up and over that slip stitch, like so, and then just slide it off. And we're then going to just pull that bit there and pull the working yarn so that it's got that same tension as the rest of our cast on stitches. Now, what I want to do is, because all the stitches look the same and it can be quite tricky to tell where the round starts and ends, I'm going to attach the stitch marker onto that stitch. Now you don't have to do this, it's just a good way of keeping you right and makes counting easier. But you can look based on where that tail end was from when you originally cast on your first stitch. Now what we're going to do is continue knitting the hat, and we're going to do the brim first, continuing this 1 by 1 rib, which we've already started from our cast on. So the first stitch we are going to purl, and then we're going to knit the next one to create that 1 by 1 rib. So I'm going to have my working yarn to the front, and I'm going to go into the front of the stitch, I wrap the yarn round, pull it through, over and off. And if you need to see 1 by 1 rib in more detail, check out my video that's just on that for some practice. And then into this next stitch we are going to knit. So into the back, wrap the yarn round, up, over and off. And we're just going to continue doing our 1 by 1 rib. Purl and then knit. Purl and then knit. And don't worry if your cable's looking a bit crazy. it will all start to form the nice circular brim of your hat as you get going with your 1x1 rib pattern. Now, if you're knitting along and you think, oh, am I supposed to be knitting or purling this next stitch? There's a couple of top tips you can use to keep you on track. So the last stitch was a knit because the yarn is to the rear. And the next stitch is going to be a purl because you've got this little bubble here. And if it's a knit, you don't have that. It kind of goes straight down. So bring the yarn to the front and purl. And that comes more obvious as we work more rows in 1x1 rib. So I will show you that again. So we're just going to continue this first round of 1x1 rib. Okay, so I can now see that I am getting to the end of the round because here's my stitch marker. Now what I'm going to do with these two stitches that are left is purl the two together. So slide the needle as if you were to purl into the front but of both those stitches, and we're going to wrap the yarn round and through both. The reason we're doing that is it's given a bit of slack for the actual rim of the hat, but now you're kind of tightening up so it fits the head circumference of a typical 6 to 12 month. And now we'll continue in that 1x1 rib. And we are going to do 6 more rounds in 1x1 rib so that we'll have 7 in total by the end. And that will leave us with a nice stretchy but nice texture as well for the brim of our hat. Okay, so I'm just continuing my 1x1 rib in the round, and I have lost count as to how many I've done. So what I'm going to do is count the rounds so that I can see where I'm at. So to do that, you can see that here is a knit and in there is the purl. And if you count the V's of the knit, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the stitch on the needle makes 7. So this is my last round of 1x1 rib for the brim. And as I said before, like when you start off and your kind of cable looks a bit sparse and is getting a bit twisted and stuff, I did say that it would sort itself out as you get more rounds on there. And you can see there that we've got this gorgeous 1x1 rib, and because of the cast on method that we used, it's super stretchy, which is great for having a comfort fit for a hat, which is definitely what you want. So we'll just finish this last round of 1x1 rib, and then we're going to start on the body of the hat. So again, I can see my stitch marker coming up, which means I'm at the end of a round. And as we counted our rounds, that was 7 to make the brim in 1x1 rib. So last stitch of the round is that purl. And then we're ready to make the body of the hat now. So the body of the hat I'm going to knit in stocking stitch. And because this is the magic loop method that we're using on these circular needles, all we're going to have to do is knit every single stitch, which sounds kind of weird because if you're knitting on the flat using straight needles, we'd obviously knit 1 row, purl 1 row. But when you're doing magic loop, you just knit into every stitch on every round. And for this size hat, we are going to do 12 rounds for forming the body of the hat. So we're going to have different textures from the 1x1 rib going into the stocking stitch. And I think that's going to be really nice, especially in this gorgeous yarn. And now we're getting to the end of the first round of the body of the hat, because I can see my stitch marker there. It's kind of hidden. There it is. And we're just knitting into every stitch. We get to this end of this round. There we go. That was the last one. And now we've got the second round of the body of our hat, and we are just going to continue knitting into every stitch. And that's how to do stocking stitch in the magic loop method. Okay, so we've just been knitting our body of the hat. by knitting every stitch and continuing the rounds in the magic loop method. And as per usual, I have lost count of how many rounds we are on. So I can see the stitch marker is coming up. Here it is. So I'm going to count how many rounds I've done to make sure that I am ready to move on to the next step. So if I start here, so there's the end of the 1x1 rib where you can see that purl stitch and that knit stitch. So if I go into the one above, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and the stitch on here, 12 rounds in stocking stitch for the body. So this is the last round of the body, and then we're going to start decreasing to shape the crown of the hat. Okay, we're coming up to the end of the round. And I'm just going to follow my stitch marker up to see what stitch that is. That is the stitch we're on. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is move my stitch marker from the bottom and follow that line of stitches up and reattach it to this stitch that's on the needle that we just knitted. The reason for that is it now gets a bit tricky to see the stitch marker because it's so low down, and we're about to start our decreases, so we really need to stay on when we're changing, when we're onto a new round. So I've moved the stitch marker up here so it's much easier to see. And now what we're going to do is start our decrease. So we've got our 1x1 brim, we've got our nice stocking stitch body of the hat, which is looking really good. And we're going to start our decrease now. So the idea is to reduce the amount of stitches and start shaping the top of the hat. So what we're going to do is knit 6 stitches and then knit 2 together. Four, 5, and then 6, and then the next 2 stitches here, we're going to go into that second stitch with our right needle into there, across the back, wrap the yarn round, and just knit those 2 together and slide off. So we've got 1 stitch, and then repeat again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then knit 2 together. I'm going to repeat that 4 times in total. Six, and just make sure that that was 6. So there's our 2 together, because you can see the stitches there leaning in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, one more. 6, and then 2 together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then the last 2 stitches here is delineated by the stitch marker. We're just going to knit those 2 together. There we are. And now the next round, what we're going to do is, because we're trying to slant it in, we're going to knit 5 and then knit 2 together. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. And what we can see here is there was our last decrease from that last round, the 2 together, and we've got the stitch before, and we're just going to slant that in, and there we are, and it'll create a nice decrease going up for the hat, which is what you want to keep it neat. And we're just going to repeat that again 4 times across the round. There we are, there's our last decrease and stitch before. I'm going to knit those 2 together. 5, and then the last 2 stitches, knit the 2 together, and then we're on to the next round where we're going to knit 4 and knit 2 together. And then last 2 stitches, knit those 2 together, end of that round, and we're now on to the next decrease round where, you've probably guessed it, we're going to knit 3 and then knit 2 together. And last 2 stitches, knit those together, And then you guessed it, we're on to knitting 2 and then 2 together. And what you're going to have to do now is that we're getting to a reduced amount of stitches on the needle is you may have to start almost threading and sliding those stitches round the cable just to make it a bit easier for you and maintain your tension. So it does get a wee bit fiddly, but bear with because you're almost there. So we're just knitting 2. And then 2 together. Knitting 2. And we're on to the last 2 stitches of the round. There's our stitch marker down there. If you follow up, there we are. Knit those 2 together. Okay, so this is where our pattern for the different sizes will change slightly depending on what size you've opted for. So what we're going to do now is knit 1 and knit 2 together for the 6 to 12 month hat. And continue that across the round. So as you can see, I'm just feeding the stitches along the cable just to keep it right. Two together, 1, and then last 2 for the round. I'm just going to neaten this up a bit. There we go. Knit those 2 together. We're on to our last decrease row. So there's our stitch marker, decrease round. So there's our stitch marker for the end of that round. And what we're going to do now is knit together right across. So straight away, you're knitting 2 together. Pull your stitches round, knitting 2 together. Again, keep sliding them round. Knitting 2 together. And then we're on the last 2 stitches of the round. There's our stitch marker, follow that up, and there we are. Knit those 2 together, and that is us finished that row, that round. We've got 4 stitches left, and what I want to do is have them all onto one of our needles, which is going to be the right one. So I'm going to pull the left needle through and just let those follow the cable round so they're all on the right needle together. And just make sure you're maintaining that tension on the last stitch. We're then going to detach ourselves from the ball end of the yarn because we are finished. And we're going to thread through these 4 stitches and secure. So with our scissors, giving ourselves a bit of a tail, cut that off. Then we're going to take up our darning needle and we're going to thread that tail end through the needle. And we are going to really carefully slide those 4 stitches off the needle and kind of pinch them together. And you're done with your knit needles. And we're going to thread that yarn through those stitches, the remaining 4. Thread it through and pull it tight. We're then going to take the darning needle and we're going to go in for the top of the hat in the center. Let's push that through. Turn the hat inside out. And we're just going to loop that under and tie a wee knot to secure. Now I'm going to leave this tail on now where it is, and the reason for that is because you may want to attach a pom-pom or a big bauble to the top of your hat. If so, leave that on in place and follow our video on how to make a pom-pom, as this will be useful for securing the pom-pom to the top of your hat. If you want to leave it as just a beanie hat, which is what I'm planning on doing, you can now cut that tail end to maybe like 1 inch left. There we are. And discard of that tail. That's now of no longer use. And if you completely have the hat so it's inside out, and we've got that cast on tail, and now I'm going to thread this through and secure to tuck this out the way. So what I'm going to do is thread it through the brim and then into the body of the hat, so that there's no little tails that's going to poke out from the bottom. So to do that, I've threaded the darning needle again, and I'm just going to go into one of these purl stitches here, and I'm just going to work my way up by wiggling the yarn along so that it gives it a bit more stay put power. And then we're into the body, and I'm just going to again work up those stitches and back on myself for 2, and that should have some serious stay power. I'm just going to leave a little bit, maybe like an inch again, and cut that off, and we can get rid of that bit of yarn. And now for the big reveal. We're going to turn the hat the right way around. There we are. I'm going to remove the stitch marker. And we now have a super cute, super chunky little hat for your little one. You can put your hat, look at the crown, you can see this cool spiral from the decrease that we did, which I think is just a smashing finish to the top of the hat. And again, as I said, if you want to attach a pom-pom to make it a bobble hat, check out our video on that, and you can stick that on. It could be a contrasting colour, it could be the same colour, but I quite like this as a wee beanie. With the texture of the rib and the stocking stitch, I think my little niece is going to love that. And with this cold winter that we're having, it's perfect timing. These also make really great hats for preemie babies who are in hospital, or newborns, because of that super stretchy cast on edge and the fact that it's a lush yarn that's breathable, which is great for the little ones in our lives. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, give us a thumbs up. If there's any other videos you want to see, or if you've got any questions, leave a comment, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon to be notified every time we've got a new video out. Thank you very much for watching, and happy knitting!